Welcome to Let's Talk Elevators, the podcast that explores insights and innovations across the vertical transportation industry. I'm your host, Morgan Jones, and this program is sponsored by Hyperion Solutions, whose focus is to deliver tailored solutions designed to elevate the customer experience.
Thanks again for being here, guys, and welcome to our very first ever live recording of the Let's Talk Elevators podcast. So today we've got a special panel of industry experts. I'm going to ask those guys to introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Greg.
Hello, I'm Greg Decola, VDA, one of the vice presidents over there. Today, my perspective is going to try and come at this challenging group from the consultant/inspector perspective.
And I'm Carlos Escobar with Hyperion Solutions. I've been in the industry, depending on how you count that, for probably about 30 years. My perspective is that of a shiv manufacturer and supplier.
I'm Kevin McInerney. I'm the president of Metro Elevator in New York. I've been in the industry for 15 years, and I'm here to defend the elevator contractors.
So I'm into the industry since probably since I was born, because my family was managing an elevator maintenance company. So since 53 years, now you know my age at the end of the story. And I'm dealing with wire ropes since more than 30 years. Ropes and suspension means. I'm working for Prysmian, and I'm the global application manager. Thank you.
And I'm Morgan Jones. I'm on year 10 in the elevator world. And today we're going to talk about something that I think everybody in the room has experienced to some degree, and that's traction systems that don't perform as they should. So we're going to talk about who owns that. Is it the manufacturer? Is it the installation? Is it the maintenance? Is it the environment? This is a debate. Healthy tension is welcome. We are here for clarity, not for comfort. Ready, guys?
Fire away.
So for our first segment, we're going to talk about where failure actually begins. So with no interruptions, I'd like to hear from each of you. When a traction system underperforms, where does responsibility most often start, Nicola?
I'm the guilty guy at this point. Okay, very good. So generally speaking, when the system is not performing in the way as it is expected, the first question I'm starting to raise is about configurations, because configuration is playing a very important role into the expectancy of life of ropes. You know, ropes are having a finite life, okay? There are formulas that are helping us to forecast the expected life in the service, and depending on how the configuration is made, how many reverse bending, how the groove shape is made, then the life expectancy can change a lot. Then if the configuration is in the right spot, then the further point of investigation is the installation method and eventually the maintenance, because the system needs to be maintained very well. One of the drawbacks that most people think about is lubrication is not good because it makes the rope sleeping. That's not true. If you are using the proper lubrication, then the traction of the rope increase. It's counterintuitive, but it is true. If you are lubricating the ropes, the traction increase. So these are the main elements that I'm trying to figure out when the lifetime is not expected as we were forecasting.
Well said. Kevin?
Well, I'm already at a disadvantage. I don't have a cool accent, so I'm not going to sound as sophisticated as you. But I think when you're looking at it, take the new installation side of it. You have architects who are trying to maximize living space. You have developers who are trying to make the most money that they possibly can. Two people who are not the end user of the elevator in most cases. Probably their biggest concern is not the reliability of the elevator long term. I think in a lot of these situations, you're seeing buildings that are under elevated. So from that perspective, I think it starts with who's designing these buildings, really. I think that's one of the keys. From a maintenance perspective, I still walk into buildings on a weekly basis with 50-year-old machines who probably haven't gotten a regroove in 10, 15 years. Who knows what the last time the ropes were replaced. But if you look at from the maintenance perspective, over the last 20 years, labor costs have increased significantly. Costs of ropes, cost of a regroove, cost of a new shiv, a new machine have drastically increased. But the cost of monthly elevator maintenance from the customer perspective really hasn't increased at the same rate. So I think looking at from a financial burden, who does that really fall on? Should it fall on the elevator contractor? I would say it should not. But I think that's something that we're going to discuss today and get to the bottom of.
Carlos, what's your take?
I didn't expect to agree with my colleague here so quickly, but I think it starts with a mismatch in expectations, particularly in mods, right? So I think that And for all the reasons you just said, architects, building ownership, and so forth, the expectation is that modern equipment can exceed or at least match what was put in place in prior years in a much smaller footprint. And I think that the discrepancy between what the expectation is and what modern equipment can actually deliver, I think that's actually where it starts.
Greg, how about you?
I'm going to go with a little different approach. It really starts from the installation. So the design is too late. The equipment is already there. Now it has to be installed. And on the installation, a lot of times the people that are doing installation are not the people that are doing the rope installation, not the people doing the complete installation. And it's a special set. And if those people are brought in, then great. But sometimes those people are not brought in. And now you're relying on someone who may or may not know the right way to tension a rope. And then that turns into a potential maintenance issue. I've seen ropes on jobs 2 to 3 years that are bad that shouldn't be. And then I've seen ones that are 30, 35 years old that are still beautiful and brilliant. So I think a lot of it has to go back to the people who are putting them in and how they're putting them in.
Great input, guys. So let's dig in a little bit more to rope life, myth versus reality. And I'd like to hear from you guys if rope life should ever be spec'd in numbers of years.
You're bringing me into the topic. So, as I said before, the rope life is a finite number, okay? And rope life is based on number of bands. So we cannot measure the lifetime in number of years, but in number of trips. And based on the number of trips, it depends if it is 1-to-1 reeving, direct reeving, 2-to-1 reeving, reverse bending, or how much complicated is the reeving arrangement. So it depends on the configuration again. I agree with Greg Decola when he said that everything starts into the design. So if the design is well made, well managed, then the lifetime of the rope will be further explored and obtained. So basically, the number of trips is really the key factor to define the lifetime of ropes. There are formulas developed, for example, by Professor Feirer that are helping you to define how many bendings the ropes can live with based on the configurations. And this is something that can be spec'd at the beginning and referred to. So this is just to give an overview on the topic, and then installation and equal tensioning and so on.
That's great feedback. Any challengers?
Can we blame the maintenance company? All right, wait, it's too early for that. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. But the one thing I think that you're leaving out is the environment also. The environment of the location of the building. Like, look around us here outside. Is the building protected? Machinery protected? I've had doors open in machine rooms. And what does that do? Right? Go out, maybe a little bit further out in Long Island, out in the Brooklyn part, and then you get the sea air. So I think the environment has to do with that also. And then the shivs too. We can't leave you out to shivs.
So let's talk about shivs too. Let's think about the fact that equipment that was installed 80 years ago, much larger, more robust machines with much larger shivs. In today's climate, when things are going smaller and more aggressive, are we as an industry overselling longevity?
I think that's me.
Go for it.
No, I don't think we're overselling longevity. Again, I just think the expectation that a machine with a 16-inch drive shiv that's hardened with V-grooves that's expected to deliver the same traction that a 36-inch shiv that's, got, 160 degrees of wrap. It's apples and oranges. Again, we're asking for a technical solution, and the machine is operating as it should. But if the expectation is that you're going to get 20 years of life, then someone hasn't managed building ownership expectations properly. So, yeah, I'm definitely a proponent for larger shivs. I'm gonna hammer away at that all day. But I believe that modern equipment performs as it's spec'd to, but the expectation doesn't match that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there. I agree. Actually, I think a lot of the theme here is going to be managing expectations from the customer, for the end user, for their developer. I think that sometimes we, as an industry, tell the end user and the developers what they want to hear, as opposed to what the new reality is. The machines of 50 and 60 years ago are not the machines of today. And that old adage of things aren't built like they used to be there is some truth to that. And I think it just comes down to kind of managing those expectations better.
I get one more thing. Technology is much different, right? Drives, processor systems. This wasn't on these older machines.
Yep.
So just one quick little thing on there.
May I add one further layer?
Sure, you may. Go for it.
Because here in North America, you are used to have very big machines and very big shifts. We are European, we have very small shaft available, and we are getting more and more into small diameter, small traction shifts, small ropes. The most common used rope in Europe is the 6.5 millimeter. That is very, very thin. I don't know into imperial metric, whatever is the conversion, but you get the feeling. So in that case, we are using special constructions that are typically Warrington, that are more flexible in this respect. And we are testing in laboratory the possible configuration to demonstrate that the lifetime is reasonable for this type of applications. So some design calculation, experimentation in laboratory can help to figure out which can be the possible lifetime.
That's very interesting. We'll all stay tuned for that, Nicola. All right, guys, let's go back to the shiv conversation for a minute. So when you think about modernization and hidden risks and longevity and cost, from the perspective of reusing a shiv in a mod, is that a responsible decision or a hidden liability?
Well, I think it depends on the condition. For one, I mean, obviously you're not going to retain a drive shiv. So we're talking about 2-to-1s, deflectors, and so forth. If they're in good condition, there's no reason not to. There's a very high prevalence of hardened traction shivs now and more aggressive grooves. But as far as the deflection goes, I think it depends on the application, of course, right? I mean,
Yeah, I agree, but I'm also of the schooling that I like the old stuff. It's just built different. It's harder. It's, as long as you can reuse it, that's the whole key. But as the consultant in the room, we have to do our study up front. And that's what we do. And we do our diligence on the machine and make sure that it's a good, viable option. The other issue you run into is in New York here is taking these machines out. So sometimes, yes, you can bring in a machine that's going to be half the size, but can we get that machine, the old machine, out without cutting it apart?
well, and what I think is really interesting about that too is, you have these monster legacy pieces of equipment that are matching rope drops that are, whatever it might be, 42 inches, 46 inches, massive rope drops by today's standards, right? I think that now you try to put in a little machine with a 20 or 25 inch drive shift.
Exactly.
You set it the same height. You reduce the wrap angle. You have to increase the rope pressure to deliver the same traction. There's a lot of consequences to going to those smaller machines that we don't often take into account, again, in mods.
And capacity and speed. That's the other two that drive it.
Yeah, I also think customer budgets play a large factor in this. We've seen it, especially with the dual plunger brake. Do we do a rope gripper? Do we do a new machine? Do we look at some
Rope gripper?
Trust me, I'm with you. What are our other alternatives to meeting this code? To me personally, if I'm recommending something to a customer, if they say, hey, I have money to do a new machine or I have money to do more door work, I'm going to recommend door work over a machine 10 times out of 10. Especially if Greg or whoever the consultant is telling me that they think the machine and the shivs are in good enough condition to keep.
And who assumes the responsibility when you're retaining that old shiv as a for instance?
It depends on the type of work we do. So sometimes pre-alteration, we will actually do machine work to get them to a standard, and that's something also schedule-wise that we're not putting into this thing, that we can do some pre-work and really not impact the building, impact them a little bit before we do the big shutdown. So you have to have the factors of that involved also.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying do no work to the machine at all. I think in a lot of cases that there's a smaller scope of work that you can do to the machine, to the shivs, that will get them in condition that is, more than suitable post-mod.
Let's move on to improper field habits and what is maybe quietly or loudly, for that matter, hurting the performance of the traction system. Nicola, what's the most common field habit shortening rope life right now?
There are several. Let's start from the installation, from the uncoiling of the reel. Because sometimes, very often, I see a picture coming back from customers telling me that the rope is defective because it's having a kink on top of it. This kink is generally caused by the unreeling operations, that they are placing the flange of the reel on the ground and then pulling the rope out. And then the rope is completely torsioned out. Once the kink is generated, we'll never get out. And so this is a new rope that has been discarded immediately. That's the first issue that I'm seeing into the field, because subcontractors are in a hurry to do the job and they do sometimes not in a proper manner. Then equal tensioning is having a very big effect on that, because if you are having a set of 5 or 6 ropes and they are not equally tensioned, equally means in a certain percentage range, then you have uneven wear on the traction grooves. So equal tensioning is definitely a topic, absolutely a topic. And another problem that I'm seeing very often during installation is alignment between the sheaves, because people are not able any longer to use the plumb line to ensure that the sheaves are perfectly aligned. And this is really killing the ropes in the early beginning. So there are fine-tuning operations that will give you a proper performance, but if you are not respecting that, then the performance will be very poor. So when people reach out to me and tell me, hey, ropes are not like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I respond back to them, also the installers are not the same. Okay, so it is a matter of competence and paying attention to the right topics.
I think that's fascinating input, and it's really interesting to learn just how quickly that starts with uncoiling a rope, and just a small kink from step one could really derail the whole installation, the whole system. Kevin, are manufacturers too quick to blame installation issues on the contractor?
No. Yes. In all seriousness though, there are so many variables that I think go into it that, just it's human nature for manufacturers to defend their product, just as it is human nature for elevator contractors to defend their mechanics who are doing the installing. I understand it. I think that potentially what comes out of this is an opportunity to increase training from manufacturers and suppliers to the installers. Because to your point, the installers of 20 years ago are not the installers of today, and maybe they're not as familiar with some of these processes as the older guys were.
Any other input, Carlos?
Yeah, I would just say I remember as a kid, it felt a lot more collaborative as well between suppliers and contractors. I think that it seems to me that the costs of making mistakes now are so great that the collaborative approach between the vendor and the contractor is kind of broken down a little bit. So the consequences of admitting fault are so great that I think that there's a reluctance to be as collaborative as it used to be. That's just an anecdotal sense that I get.
One thing to add is you were asking about the field, the training of the field. When you talk to the field personnel about the type of rope, what do the numbers mean? A lot of them don't know. How do they properly tension those ropes? Forget it. Again, I'm on the consultant inspection side. If I was on the contractor side, I would have every 3 months tension training and rope training, because that's really where my exposure is on my contract, full service.
Let's move on to spec versus reality, what's designed and what's real. So back to you, Carlos. Do you feel that consultants are speccing or designing for ideal conditions that just don't exist?
No, I don't think it's that they're designing for conditions that don't exist. I think that they're working within the constraints that architects, building owners, developers provide them. And their job is to advocate for those stakeholders. And so, they have to deliver that product, that application, that performance. What they're asking of suppliers, machine manufacturers, component manufacturers and whatnot, I take a step back. I mean, the ropes of today, the shivs of today, the products that we're designing and putting out there are better. I mean, they are just definitively better products. But again, I think the expectation is a little different. When somebody goes to Greg and says, I need to repurpose this roof deck to put in some ancillary service or something, and you got to eliminate a motor room, or putting in a system that will only deliver ropes that have 2 years worth of life is just the new reality. So I don't think that they're being unrealistic in what they're expecting.
I think we are completely in line with what we're doing. We're doing it the right way, right? But we there's also a lot of education that goes into those specs. So we're talking to the manufacturers, we're going to the trade shows, we're seeing the products, and we're finding out the limitations. And then you may get burned on the job, and then you don't go that direction again, right?
So to that point, how often are field conditions invalidating a spec or throwing a wrench into what was originally spec'd?
That's the most important thing really to figure out, where it's going with the usages. That's probably a big problem that we've had now post-COVID, is that buildings were being built and now they're being repurposed, or their original plan changed a little bit because the nature of what people do changes. Yes, there is some elevatoring issues, but the elevatoring has to happen up front. It has to happen up front. The architects are always trying to push, and they're trying to, walking here, there's a building that is way too high with not as many elevators as it should have.
May I add another piece of complication out of that? Because the modern tendency is to get smaller sheaves and to get away from double wrap and using V-grooves, hardened V-grooves. This is absolutely increasing the specific pressure and the stress on ropes. And so in the same condition, in the same, not configuration, but the same number of ropes installed, the lifetime will be dramatically shortened out because the motor will be more performant, will be smaller, will be easier to be installed, but all the charge will be on the rope side, rope and sheave side, because the relationship between the two will be with very high pressure. And so this will drop down the performance in service. So it's also a matter of design, because designing more challenging in this direction will have a payback that is a shorter lifetime, both of ropes and sheaves at the end of the story.
That's good input. Let's talk about data versus reality and if we're measuring enough. So Greg, coming back to you, what kind of testing is being done today and what should be?
Well, there is a big resistance right now on like the engineered test. We're doing category 5 inspections, but in code for years has been the non-destructive category 5 that we're not doing. That's an engineered test, right? That a lot of people push back on. That to me is probably better than what we do in a traditional category 5. Traditional category 5, we're almost wrecking the elevator and then putting it in service for the public, right? Where the engineered test is a much more structured engineered test of the equipment, the components, and this and that. So when it gets to the testing, there's other things we can be doing. I know a lot of the manufacturers have a lot of like non-US test towers, and then they come and talk to us in the US about the products that they're running there. That's great. That's wonderful. And then my first question is always, okay, how many are running here in the US? Okay, get a couple under your belt, and then let me go see a couple, and then we can talk.
Fair point. Carlos, do you feel that groove analysis should be documented? Should it be mandatory?
Definitely. I think that there is a lack of understanding or ability to test and measure in the field for running machines right now. Like, for example, there's a lot of folks that are going out and regrooving shivs and never then retesting hardnesses and then putting on new cables that are burying themselves into softer shivs. Manufacturers, whether we're small or large, we have the ability to deliver bespoke engineering solutions, right? So it may not be common knowledge, but we can tune a groove to deliver traction a variety of different ways, right? I mean, we can increase undercuts, we can do progressive grooves and V grooves to deliver different pressure on the rope. But that's not something we're often asked to do.
I was going to say that what you're saying is in the field is unrealistic.
Right.
But unrealistic.
But I think the point is that people don't take advantage of that. We're not actually customizing to the application. And I mean, now we're getting to the economics of it, right? I mean, as a manufacturer, we want to scale and build 1,000 of any one thing, not 2 for Kevin or Greg, but the possibility exists to do so.
But go back to the real world of we have a 40-story building that needs a rope and shiv job, and all we have is the weekend.
Right. And
all we have is the weekend, and now I'll go back to my contractor days. I'm calling around 50 people who work for me trying to find any 5 that can show up, and hopefully one of the 5 knows what they're doing.
But you then
let alone now going and checking into my shiv
But
pencil.
so that's the problem, right? So if you're on site and you say, I need the shiv tomorrow, I need it right now, and you're just going to go and you're going to call me up and say, produce a traction shiv for this old Houghton machine. And I'm just going to pump one out with a 90-degree undercut and I'm going to get you running, and that's great. But the expertise in the field doesn't exist anymore for someone to say, no, that's a 95-degree undercut on that particular 301 Houghton.
And it's not to discredit the field whatsoever. It's it's just the timing, especially in our New York market here. New York market is such a now market that, it's like, what do you mean it's going to take a week to do a rope job? I'm like, yeah, you have a big building. Like, what? We're not changing tires.
Back to expectations and resetting expectations.
Well, I just say get it done, right? Because thank God I'm not on the contractor side anymore. Thank God for that. So
no, but to answer your question, that ought to be documented, right? I mean, I don't often get that level of detail from anyone, very infrequently, to produce a replacement shiv.
Can I speak from the inspector perspective now?
Absolutely.
When I go as an inspector and I go, let's say the machine room in this building here, well, now there's a requirement of a maintenance control program, right? And there's an MCP. And as the inspector, I'm supposed to go there and I'm supposed to look at it and I'm supposed to examine it. And I see that John was there in 2024. In April. Thanks, John. Let alone what Carlos is asking for. So we can't even get the basic clean machine, do this, unless you have the consultant that's there monitoring the job. And that's something which we eventually have to do now.
And I think that's one of the really hot topics in our industry that we talk about quite a bit is the outgoing generation of expertise and the new generations coming in. Do we feel like digital tools are our future, or is that overkill?
They're great when they're used properly. So we were talking before about the rope tensioning. Well, there's some great rope tensioning devices out there people sell that are wonderful. But if the field person doesn't even know what to do with it, or if they get it and they're like, what am I doing with this thing? So it comes back down to the training and the end user and then the company. And then also, what did they buy? Sometimes they bought something that they thought was going to do something else and it doesn't do what they wanted to do, or it does too much. So there's a lot to that digital aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable, right? I mean, I don't know, it's a hot topic for me in most of my conversations, how I'm applying AI in what I do. So it's inevitable. I mean, if you're not embracing it, it's going to be a challenge for you. But I think a lot of my upbringing was kind of tribal knowledge at Titan, right? And learning the ways in which things were done from some really knowledgeable machinists and field mechanics and so forth. And we all have to figure out a way to database that, to document it, to scale that knowledge. And I think tools are becoming available to do just that. So I think that we all need to embrace it.
Yeah, I think as an industry, and I don't want to upset anyone, but as an industry who has historically been reluctant, I think, to accept advances in technology, it's really vital that we do, especially with the outgoing of all the expertise in this industry and this new age of, younger kids who don't know anything else other than this new technology.
I will add, as always, a new layer on top of that, because the technology is allowing also the knowledge to be shared quite quickly. So artificial intelligence is helping people to get first answers, where to look for informations, which are the source of information, something that when I was a blue collar into the family company was not available at all. Google was not existing, for example, just to make a point. So using the digital tools is for sure accelerating the learning curve for everyone. So from my point of view, we need to use it in a proper manner, using the brain. The brain shall be still in place, but artificial intelligence can help to find out more quickly the informations.
That's a great point. I agree, you guys. Let's do some rapid fire questions, quick answers. What's the biggest myth about rope life?
The rope will never end. So obviously, as I said before, lifetime is limited. It is having a certain number of bands. Remember the topic bands, not trip bands, because depending on the configuration, then you can have 1 band, 10 bands, 15 bands, whatever, based on configuration that the elevator is working with. So the myth that the rope shall last 20 years, 30 years, forget about. It depends on number of trips, and it depends on how many trips per day the elevator is running. Because when the building has been manufactured, probably people were younger and were not using too much the elevator. But over the years, the elevator has been used more and more frequently. So it depends on the frequency of usage of the elevator, the number of trips, and the number of bands. So if you craft everything together, then you can have the secret sauce formula in a certain way.
Another myth is that the ropes don't need to be maintained, don't need to be looked at.
Good one.
That's probably the biggest thing that from representing an owner is, yes, you have to do something. Don't just look at it every month you go there and check my chart.
I just think the myth that, for one, every so often you get somebody that says that fiber core ropes are better or they're stronger or something. I mean, it's like really out there. Modern ropes are better. I mean, assuming you're sourcing them from a proper supplier, modern ropes are produced better, more consistently.
Are better.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they just are. There's no, when someone says they used to run for 20 years, it's not because of the rope. It's the system is different now. So I would say the myth is that, old ropes were somehow better.
What's one thing that consultants get wrong?
Nothing. Yeah.
Thinking that all elevators should be covered under a full maintenance contract, even if the unit isn't in a condition that should be covered under a full maintenance contract for the price the customer is willing to pay.
What's one thing that contractors get wrong?
I from, again, a real world perspective is that, now we'll talk about an alteration or modernization, right? Is that they can go and do a 20-minute walkthrough in a machine room and then price a full job for, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars per device, give us a unrealistic schedule, and then, try, and I completely get
and
it.
Get me to commit to it.
Get you to commit to it and, beat up vendors to jump lines. So that's, probably our frustration. And again, I get it because, we're, as a consultant, we may invite 5-6 companies to come and walk through the job, and you're not going to get every one of them. So yes, there is a big waste of time, but there's also a great effort in time. So I'm big on, hey, go back, take a look. I have pictures. You want me to send you something, so that's probably not to beat on the contractors that much.
One other topic that both get wrong is that always the rope fault. So we need to educate them on this topic.
It's not the ropes. Noted.
That's a rope guy talking.
No, but
not the ropes.
I think it's this expectation thing, right? I mean, we all make these assumptions and we forget that these are really complicated systems where little details make a big difference. And so when you have a walkthrough that's a half hour,
Exactly.
he gets limited information, calls me up and says, well, that's all I've got. And I can't return to the motorhome. I don't know if I have clearance, but deliver a proposal by tomorrow because I got a bid due. And then we run with
Yes,
it.
but what I could say realistically also is if you call us and talk to us, we're friendly. We've done the surveys. We have the information you probably need, and probably the new intern that you sent there to meet me didn't get the right picture you need.
What do we feel like is something that the industry is getting wrong?
Training. I believe with our topic today, and I've touched on it a couple times, the training is not where it needs to be on such a cost-effective product. When it comes to the ropes and the shivs and the maintenance of it, testing of it, like that to me is what's missing. I've done rope classes to companies and I'm amazed the lack of knowledge of what, just like I said before, what the numbers are on the rope. Let alone what's inside there, the fiber core, or the steel core, what it's made of, comprised of. So I think training.
Yeah, I think it's short-sighted. A lot of companies are reluctant to send a team or a couple teams to training for a couple days because they say, oh, it's going to cost me X tens of thousands of dollars to do that. When in reality, in the long term, it's going to save you money on ropes. It's going to save you money on time for installation. So I think short-sighted economics is a problem.
The penny wise, dollar foolish, right?
Yes.
Well, especially with ropes.
That's that lack of collaboration. Like or the costs of being wrong are so high. It used to be that you could show up on a job site and kind of iterate with each other on a complicated issue, right? I mean, we don't all instantly have the answers, especially in the absence of perfect information, but we don't do that anymore. So we're not learning from each other, and field teams aren't learning from machine shops and repair facilities and overhaul sites. So yeah, absolutely training.
And go back when I first started in the industry in the machine shop, right? That's where I started as a kid. Those machine shops aren't around anymore.
All right, let's do a little bit of cross-examination from the audience for anybody brave enough. So you can stand up, ask a question. You can direct it to any one of the panelists or whoever is going to be brave enough to answer you.
Out there, what do you guys think of coating cables and the belts versus regular, cables? Like your perspective on it. Obviously, for mid-rise, not obviously high-rise. Well, I'll comment first. For the right application, right job, they're great. Right? Some of the first ones that were installed here in New York are still running with the original cables. And then some of the ones that were not the right application have going through issues right now, 5 years later, 6 years later, 3 years later, 2 years later. So I got Don. I think it goes back to the right application, right job for 'em. Wrong application, wrong job. No.
Don, I will provide you an answer based on European experience, because in Europe we are using a lot the coated suspension means. It is quite common for us to go there. The coated suspension means are having very long lifetime expectancy because wires are very well protected, but they are bringing several complications because the TPU, the elastomeric covering outside the suspension means, is very sensible to dust, environmental condition, condensation. So the environment is playing a very big role on that. And furthermore, they need to be regularly cleaned, something that people is not used to deal to. So cleaning the coating is one of the main maintenance operations to be performed on that. Furthermore, the coated suspension means are very much sensible to the quality of installations. A very little fleet angle create a lot of noise, torsion, and the burr-caging from the core. So the performance is there because they're having very high friction factor. They can work on very small traction shifts. That basically means that the gearless machine can be very small, but they require a lot of attention, competence, and maintenance looking after to that. So we come back to the point of training on the job. So it is really important to use the right product with the right application. So this is what I can bring on top of that.
That really makes me feel about the added layer of labor. If you've got to do an extra step of cleaning the ropes themselves, that feels like a major undertaking.
Yeah, instead of relubricating conventional ropes, you need to clean them. Then depending on the environment in which you are, then maybe you need to clean once per year, or maybe you need to clean every single month. I get an experience into a construction area in which the shaft was working like a vacuum cleaner. So was absorbing all the dust all around, and the contractor was supposed to clean the belt every single month. Then the construction area stopped, and he was not supposed to clean the belt any longer. So once per year was more than enough. So the environment is paying a very great effect on these coated suspension means. Coated suspension means has been introduced recently into the ISO 8100 that is in publication now. And into this code, there are some requirements that need to be paid attention to, because every combination between coated suspension mean and traction shift need to be tested. With wire ropes, we are having 200 years of experience that the friction factor is always the same. But with coated suspension means it depends on the TPU, because every producer of TPU is having a different recipe, but also on the roughness of the sheave. So every producer of sheave is having a different roughness. So the combination between the two is giving rise to a certain number of different friction factors. So if we enter into the engineering on the topic, the argument becomes quite complicated, but they are giving a lot of advantages.
I just want to point out that we're moving towards something where we are used to plug and play components in the non-proprietary space, right? So you're used to being able to substitute a particular rope manufacturer, sheave manufacturer, whatnot. That is not true of belted and coated machines. So a lot of these things are engineered to work with specific products, partners, shackles, monitors, and so forth. That for at least the outset, it's very likely that we're going to be operating in a space where, for all intents and purposes, you're calling them non-proprietary machines, but they're operating within a very small ecosystem that we're not used to right now. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, you don't have the longevity bandwidth yet, right? And you haven't had the second tier market yet of the replacements that I keep hearing is coming, but I don't know. We'll see, right?
It is.
We will see. Next question, Amy.
A little bit on sourcing as far as longevity of ropes, what you guys see. I have heard a lot of feedback in industry that ropes that come from a certain very large red country in this world are quite inferior. Do you guys see that?
So basically, from my point of view, does not depend necessarily on the country of origin, because there are countries in which there are hundreds of rope manufacturers. Some of them are very good, they're very sharp, and some of them are having poor performance. From time to time into our company, we are testing ropes coming from different sources, different countries. We go to the university to do the testing, the fatigue lifetime testing. And we discovered that some country that we were thinking about poor performance, they performed very well. And other country that we were thinking were very good, they not performed as expected. So I would not rather think about country, but about companies. Because just to make an example, China is the largest market for elevators. I can tell you there are probably 600 rope manufacturer or something like that. I shoot a number. I don't know exactly the number. I visited several of them. Some of them are really good. They are producing very good performing ropes. Some others are really not at the level. Okay. Consider that ropes are a product of experience. There is not a formula that can tell you how a rope can perform. There are so many parameters, the lay length, the preforming, the type of cores, and so on and so forth. So depending on the experience of the company, depending on the improvement they put in place, they can produce very good quality or very bad quality, but the rope construction is the same. It's not that easy to answer your question. It's a complicated question for sure, but I hope to have clarified a little bit the perimeter on that.
And from a consultant standpoint, right, the contractor is the one that's going to be responsible for what they're buying. So it's really kind of a buyer beware but also with us, we want you to get really good stuff, because the last thing we want to do is go back to our building 3 years later. And even though you're going to own the job because you charged them for it, the last thing we want is bad ropes. So yeah, I think there's some homework on where we're getting these things also. And from the consultant standpoint on pricing, we'll see pricing because someone is actually sourcing it from someplace and they're getting a cheaper price. Right. We know that. And we really don't want that sometimes, but we're also got to gauge it with our customer on it. But at the end of the day, I can tell you personally, if you do sell our customer a set of ropes, you're going to be responsible for multiple years for it. So make sure you buy something that's really good.
Yes, Pete.
Education and expectation seem to be the two deficiencies in the marketplace, whether it be the end user, contractors, field teams. Who should be most responsible and reframing expectations?
I mean, I'll start with that one. Everybody from the manufacturers should be setting up workshops to the companies, to the manufacturers. Like, to me, education person, but the education should be everyone. The problem, I'll go back when I was in the field, like I wanted to learn, but I had these people that didn't want to teach, right? They had their secrets. I wish there was a field guide that I worked with early on in my career, and you talk about tensioning ropes. I mean, guy was a genius because he would just be on top of that car and, kid, turn this one. No, go to that one. Go to this one. And he'd be like listening and ding. So the education really starts with everyone, right? There's all different aspects of it. But I think as an industry, we have to do a lot more education with the field people. We have to do more education with the consultants, right? Educate me, right? Show me your products. I love doing the factory tours. I love it. I love coming and see what you have, right? I got people laughing, but I'm also starting in shops. I'm a shop kid, right? But yeah, the education, I think it really is everyone's responsibility, because if we know what you're doing, it makes our job easier. The field people are probably the one that needs the most education, but the problem in the equation, they're the ones that aren't getting the education, because that's the one that costs the most, because they can't be productive. We can't be selling them if we're educating them, but we are. We're educating them in their future.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got to be a collaboration, right? I mean, the whole reason we have this panel, I think, is because there's a lot of finger pointing when things do go wrong. So I think coming out of this, the idea of collaboration and all of us getting together to make sure that the field knows what they're doing when they're installing is key.
I mean, I think that, it's all of our responsibility, but I think we're in a unique place now. And again, just pivoting back to AI and the scalability of what that technology allows us to do, it feels like the era of gatekeeping is kind of over. right? So very soon, whatever you think you know that you're protecting because you think that's what makes you valuable, that's probably already out there.
Yes,
So
it is. And go back what someone said earlier. Like, yeah, when I was in the field, we didn't have the internet and Google. We didn't even have cell phones to phone a friend. It was, pretty much manned there against the machine. Some people loved it and some people didn't.
Well, it's like machine shop stuff, right?
Yes.
You think you are uniquely capable of performing or understanding a process, a repair, an overhaul, whatever. That information, I promise you, is already out there. So, from that perspective, I think that, we're all forward-thinking people, I think, in this room and on this panel. I think we can probably...
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Everything on the internet's true, right?
Well, no, right. So of course, we have to validate what we're putting out there. We have to validate what we're putting out there and ask for reputable sources.
You have to be careful. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. So when I talk to the field people, I'm like, look, go to 3 websites before you put a harness on. Right? Don't just go to the first one. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that we have a unique opportunity now to leverage technology to educate more broadly.
Definitely, without a doubt.
I think talking about technology and education, there's a lot of advancements going on in other trades. I mean, this thing involved of not collaborating with other trades and learning about everything from manufacturing to installation, AI, of course, but you think there's opportunities that we should do where we collaborate with other trades.
I mean, there's some other trades I hear about their apprenticeship programs, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty, they're really putting a great effort into that future. But also you need to have the future that wants it also. So it's twofold.
Yeah, I think some of the issue there with the idea of technology in our industry is some companies have used predictive maintenance and tools that they've kind of adopted to perform less maintenance. And I think that we've got a pretty good now example of that not really working the way that they may have thought it was going to work. So now you have customers and consultants who say, oh, well, maybe that's not the greatest. So it kind of set back technology a little bit in our industry. But to your question, yes, I do think that other industries are starting to pull ahead in the technology advancements, and we need to catch up or collaborate with them.
Yeah, I mean, from a manufacturing point of view, definitely. I mean, there's the way to cut a shiv that we've been doing for 140 years, and there's ways of manufacturing at scale now that just far surpass what we used to do. So yeah, definitely, we should evolve.
Ed?
Kevin had made the point earlier, but I opened the questions to the panel. You had noted that elevator maintenance costs has not grown comparatively with the corresponding labor and material costs you're seeing in the industry. Why do you think that is?
Specifically to New York, I think there's so much competition that, nobody wants to lose business. Everyone wants to keep growing. And if you're forced into meeting a price, you have to make a business decision. And I think a lot of companies are willing to say, hey, I'll take that job on maintenance and, hope I don't get called out on a lot of things. I don't think that that's the way to operate. That's not how we operate. But I think that there are enough companies in this city who are willing to operate like that it has prevented the fair price of maintenance from increasing at the same rate that your labor and material costs have increased.
Units versus dollars, right?
And it's not unique to New York. I've worked in all 50 states.
And I had this conversation with the competitor a couple of years ago of ours. I'm like, look, I'm not in the race to the bottom. And there's some markets that I went into. I'm like, I can't be in this market because I cannot do what you do and carry the insurance that I have to carry and be a legitimate company to do what you do at that price point. But I do understand what you're talking about. And yeah, we want you to get your increase. We do, but it has to be fair and we have to be able to justify it. And then the flip side, you have to now perform to that contract. And that's the other thing where people kind of scale back because like, oh, I'm in at this price, so I can't be there. Well, yes, you have to be there because that's what we said you were going to do. And you said you were going to do that.
Well, I think there is not to go down a rabbit hole, but I do think there is a willingness to perform maintenance to the spec. I think that the market conditions that have been created make it difficult for some specs.
I would agree. And even the pricing, sometimes from the consultant side, I'll see the low price and my customers all over it. And I'm like, no, we cannot. Like they're not doing what there's something's going to happen. So we're not starting off in a bad way. But no, we have to. When you talk to the condo board, we're like, no, we're throwing that price out. Or a lot of times and I've had the real world conversation with the company. I've called people and be like, you're missing something. send me, you're missing something. And then they'll call me back like, oh yeah, my estimator forgot doors. That's a big thing.
Any other questions from the group?
Do you collaborate with the equipment machine manufacturers on their pitch or the size of the ship? Because the second part of that is because I've noticed in New York in particular, there's some machine manufacturers that generally result in premature traction shift wear on certain rods and building. So I'm just curious.
Yeah. Generally speaking, we are collaborating with motor manufacturer. I bring to you the European side of experience, then we will tackle with the North America. In Europe, as you probably imagine, we developed furthermore the small diameter, the small traction sheaves, and so on and so forth. So it has been quite challenging to get a proper performance, and this kit could not have been obtained without the collaboration between the motor producer and the rope manufacturer, because the combination between the two is giving you the result, the performance. So we supported all the main motor producers to develop their own configurator, their own line configurator, based on calculation, fatigue lifetime expectancy, testing from laboratory, in a way to get a suitable performance into the field. So the combination between the two elements giving the proper performance. The more you go into small diameter, the more you will require hardened sheaves. And hardened sheaves are quite aggressive in this respect. So you need to increase the number of ropes to reduce the specific pressure. It's physical law. You cannot overcome this direction. In North America, we started to investigate the opportunity to develop furthermore the collaboration between machine manufacturer and we are a rope supplier. We do not manufacture ropes, but we are reselling ropes to the market. Thanks to the fact that we are having knowledge about and competence about application, combination between the two parts. We are trying to develop furthermore this exploration into the market. You know, there are several European rope motor manufacturers coming to North America. We are in collaboration with them, and we are trying to reach out as well to local motor producers in a way to get suitable combination between the two elements. The collaboration is not yet fully developed. We are working to improve that application, because only between the two combination you can get a proper performance in service.
Do you prefer a product that you can easily replace, like a shift that wears, you pop it off, put a new one in them, oversimplify it, or one that has life to it where you can regroup it once, twice? Is there a preference for you in the manufacturing?
Personally, I wouldn't say that there's a preference. I think it depends on how much room you have in the machine room, how easy is it to get the shiv out. You know, a lot of the machine shops do the regrooves on site now, so it's easier in that sense. Downtime, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. Personally, I don't have a preference.
I'd say, how long is your contract, right?
All right, guys. Well, I hope we all take away today an agreement that hoistways don't lie. Physics wins every time. And it's whether or not we're going to all align before the installation or argue about it after the fact. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of Let's Talk Elevators. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe and leave us a review. If you have questions or ideas for a future episode, connect with us on letstalkelevators.com. Until next time, stay safe and keep moving up.